All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to our Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NOCD. NOCD, an online platform for the treatment of OCD and related conditions. If you're needing help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at nocd.com. That's NOCD.com. If you want help for OCD, body-focused repetitive behaviors, tics, hoarding. We work with anxiety and mood issues as well that come along with that. We have specialized training, even in areas for trauma for our members. We would love to work with you. And we do work in Canada and the UK and Australia and the US. We also do something that I really love, our NOCD 411 sessions. Those are sessions for people who might not be ready for the primetime therapy stuff, but want to know information about OCD or the conditions that we treat. Or maybe you're a family member or a friend of somebody who you think might have OCD. It's an hour to chat with somebody and get some feedback and get your questions answered. So if you want help with that, you can also go to nocd.com for one of our NOCD 411 sessions. I am excited to be joined tonight by a few of our NOCD therapists. And so why don't I hand it over to them and let them introduce themselves. Go right ahead. Happy to have you both here tonight.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Deirdre James. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in OCD treatment at NOCD.
Awesome. Thanks, Deirdre.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Gloria Sherrod. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I'm actually new to NOCD, but I also specialize in ADHD as well.
Awesome. We've had some ADHD questions, so that'll be good if we get some of those tonight and chat with those. And one of the things we wanted to talk about throughout the night too is just it is Black History Month and is celebration of that and future history or orientation or creed or various months that will happen throughout the year of celebrating the diversity of our world. We're going to have people on and we're going to talk about various issues in all of those different communities. So we will pepper some of that in throughout the night as we do our work here. And I know we should have a few of our other therapists who will be joining us throughout the night as well. So I'm excited for that. But why don't we start off with a couple of questions and then we'll go ahead and we'll get into a couple of things. 4103 says, can you please explain in detail about response prevention? Mm-hmm. And, well, as you two know, we sure do talk about response prevention a lot, don't we, at NOCD? Yeah. What do you want to say about response prevention?
So it's a statement that pushes you into uncertainty, right? A lot of times with OCD, we have the doubt, right? And what we naturally do is want to give it an answer like yes or no or something like that. But we want to be more effective with our OCD and say something like maybe or maybe not once we identify that core fear. So that's what you speak to, the fear that you have, and you use that statement of uncertainty, which is the response prevention message.
Yep. And in addition to the message, you want to do some kind of response prevention exercise as well. So that would be doing the opposite of the compulsion. So if your compulsion is to go check the door, you would want to not check the door, right? You would want to delay checking the door. You would want to undo checking the door if you did check the door, maybe with the message of saying something like, even though I checked it, it's probably unlocked anyway. Something where, again, you're living with that doubt and that uncertainty. And let me ask, do either of you have a guarantee about anything in your life whatsoever?
Only that I'll die one day. That's it.
Well, I think we're all got that one. Otherwise, yeah. How do the two of you live with the doubt and uncertainty of just not knowing even what's going to happen within a minute from now with 100% guarantee?
Gloria, do you want to go or I'll just keep?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I just remind myself that I don't have the answers to certain things, and I have to kind of sit with the discomfort with some things that I may not know until I know. And that's kind of something that over time, I think with time and age and life experience, you kind of learn that you can think of all the possibilities in the world, but you're not going to know until it happens. And so with experience and life experience, I've really grown to see that that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add, for me, acceptance is a big thing, right? Just accepting all of it and the not knowing when, how, what, why, just sitting in that and allowing that to be.
Yeah. And we'll likely see themes tonight in all of the questions that come through where people will say things like, I understand that, but this seems different to me. Or what if this is the one time that it's not XYZ or something of that nature. There's OCD seems to throw things at people, something along the lines of, but this doubt is special or this doubt is different than all of the other doubts. I can handle every other doubt, but not this one. This one has a special meaning in some way. And uh, how do the two of you work with people on that? And then do you see any particular things when you're working with people of color where that might come up in a way that maybe doesn't come up for more of the majority populations? Go ahead, Deidre.
Okay. I'm just waiting to give you an opportunity. So, working with people and people of color, a lot of the time, what I've noticed is it's a lot talking about like manifestation. I don't want to say this things because that's going to make it come true. Like this is really going to make it happen if I write this down, or, some of the times we do worst case scenario strips. If I write this down, it's actually going to happen. There's no way. Or some of the themes that people feel are more taboo. So if it's like sexual orientation OCD or pedophilia type OCD, people are really concerned about those and say, like, I just can't do that with this. This is a different type. It's not like everybody else. It's not contamination OCD. They like to say that a lot. So, but
Yeah.
ERP, exposure and response prevention, works for all subtypes of OCD. It doesn't matter what it is, what the theme is. It's all about seeking uncertainty, sitting in that distress, and learning how to tolerate it, right? That's what we're doing when we're practicing this together.
Yeah. It's hard to tolerate things, right? I mean,
It is.
wouldn't a guarantee be much nicer than having to tolerate something?
It would be so much nicer.
I would like guarantees. I think
All
that
the time. Hmm.
they would be really wonderful, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you brought up that idea of what a lot of people call manifesting, the notion that uh, you might even list this as thought action fusion, right? Thinking something, saying something, writing something is just as bad as doing it. That it will somehow make it happen. In the work the two of you have done with OCD so far, and I know we always try to participate in doing the ERP. Have any of the things you've thought or written down actually occurred because you've thought or written them down that you're aware of so far?
Not yet, right? I don't know. Maybe that will happen, maybe they won't.
Right.
But that's what I tell people a lot, like in session. I know Dr. McGrath likes to do it when he does presentations, but I'm like, my roof could fall on me right now and
Yeah.
I could die, right? It could
Mhm.
collapse and but who knows if that's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. And I've said it in multiple sessions. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. It could, right?
It is.
It is
It's true.
possible.
It is possible.
Yeah. But if it does, I don't know that we're going to blame the fact that we thought it or said it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
maybe sometimes things just happen as well.
Mhm.
OCD will never accept that. OCD will say, "Yeah, but what if it is because?"
Mhm.
And therefore, was it even worth taking the chance? And are you willing to take the chance, right?
Right.
And we just want people to be like, "Yeah, we could take the chance.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with taking a chance." Uh, Imagine if nobody did anything unless they had a guarantee. I don't know that anybody would ever do anything.
How could you?
I couldn't even take a step because I wouldn't have a guarantee that I wouldn't land wrong and break a foot or something
Mhm.
like that, right?
Mhm.
So tweak a bone or something of that nature. So I don't know that there's anything that anybody could actually do. if that's the case.
Yeah, I wouldn't leave the house, right? If I couldn't live with uncertainty, I might as well stay here.
Yeah.
So,
Gloria, I know that you work with, and you have some work prior to NOCD with ADHD. We had a question for the last few weeks about kind of where does ADHD maybe end and OCD begin, or what do you see? And I'm wondering, in your ADHD training, now that you're working with us at NOCD, what do you see as kind of a relationship between the two conditions? That would be interesting to hear.
For sure. I was just thinking about this yesterday because I think there can be so much overlap, and we talk about the function of behaviors and how certain behaviors can look the same but mean something different to people.
Mm-hmm.
For example, perfectionism. A lot of people with ADHD struggle with perfectionism because they harbor some shame about their symptoms, their executive dysfunction, their difficulties with starting tasks, getting things done, and seeing things through, and being punctual. Over time in life, there's a lot of feedback that we might receive about our worth and who we are as ADHD, and that can lead us to wanting to try to do everything perfectly or not want to mess up this real level. We've gotten certain responses from people about what we don't do well enough, then that could lead to some perfectionism. And I think for some people that might feel or look a little bit like OCD. And learning more about OCD, of course, I can see as a therapist a clear difference there. But for some people, it might feel like um, I can't get things done or I can't complete tasks because it has to be perfect. And they might think that that's OCD when maybe more of a response to their ADHD or some of their executive dysfunction. I also noticed that some people uh, struggle with indecisiveness sometimes too, and like not, and it can look like, oh, I can't do this unless it's perfect, but maybe it's because they like can't decide what order to do things in, or I can't start my day unless I do this specific thing in a certain way. And sifting through that in therapy and figuring out, okay, is this OCD or is this ADHD, can sometimes be a challenge. And I found that in ADHD coaching and therapy, sometimes I've had to like look at someone and decide, okay, is the OCD actually like making things even harder for the ADHD, and we have to like work with the OCD and then come back to the ADHD, or kind of what's happening for that person.
Mm-hmm. So they can definitely go hand in hand then, right? You can,
Yeah.
and but it's probably good to consult on these cases to make sure you understand where one kind of phases into the other, one ends, the other begins, or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How about for the two of you coming into OCD treatment? What is the perception more specifically in the Black African American community, A, around OCD, B, maybe even mental health? And I'm going to ask this of everyone this year when we go through various months. What can we do specifically for that community around stigma to help assure that people get the treatment that we know works? And how do we do that? And I'll just say one of the things that I think is important is that as we continue to publish studies, we make sure that we have representative samples so that we know the treatment applies to all communities and not just white males or females or something like that. Or we need to broaden that experience. So that's number one. But I'm interested in hearing from you what particular you think about that.
I think education of what OCD actually is big, right? Because a lot of people don't understand it. They see it as one thing, right? Either it's contamination or it's like tapping in orderly type stuff. But OCD is much bigger than that. And unfortunately, I think for people like in the Black community, if you go to get treatment for some of these things, it's not looked at as OCD, but it may be looked at as something else. So it can be unsettling at times to go for treatment and
Okay.
not know how it's going to be taken, right? Because there's that additional stigma of like, well, they may think I'm just aggressive, right? Because I'm having these thoughts. They may think these thoughts are real, even though I don't feel like these thoughts are real. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to get that across to people, but they don't see it. So, not only educating the public, but other providers, because I think a lot of times there's issues when people go to a provider before they come to NOCD or another place that specializes in OCD, and they're told to do certain things that kind of make it worse and
Mhm.
increases the stigma. The person then doesn't want treatment at all, right? Because then they're like, you know what? Why even try? Because they don't understand me and where I'm coming from. So I think it's very big to go into places where people of color will be and explaining that to them, showing them, and letting them see that, there are clinicians who look like you as well. We understand to a degree, right? Everybody's OCD is different, and we're willing to listen and hear more from you from your own personal experience.
Yeah, that's great. Gloria, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say representation and having open conversations about our own experiences with OCD is important. I remember when I first started talking about ADHD a little bit before it was kind of like very popular to talk about it online. I got a lot of messages from people just saying, like, wow, you're the first Black woman I've seen talk about ADHD.
Okay.
And for them, that made them feel safe to talk about their own experiences and bring it up.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the stigma, I think, continues when we don't talk openly about the fact that we experience certain things as well. So that's important.
Yeah, and that's why I'm thrilled to have the two of you here tonight, because we do need more of that. And uh, I'm proud of the diversity of the NoCD network, and I want to showcase that throughout the year. So I'm happy to have the two of you here joining me to show that we find that to be very important, to make sure that people know they can come here and meet with a therapist who looks like them, sounds like them, thinks like them, likes the food they like, what, because there's so many different ways to connect with people, right? I mean, uh, I, I love talking about food when I'm with people, and people are always surprised that Ethiopian food is my favorite food in the entire world, right? But I will talk about it all day with people, just like that kind of stuff. So I love to find ways to connect, and I just think that it's essential that we showcase that. Mhm. Yeah. Awesome. Let's take a look at a few other questions. We've got. Oh, here we go. I've read some of the things you all have written in OCD. You say that compulsions aren't your fault. They're like flinching. But last time you told us compulsions were a choice. What did you mean by that? Well, okay, that's good. I like that one, because there are some things that happen automatically, right? I mean, if I tell you not to think of a pink elephant, what will the two of you think of?
Pink elephant.
Okay, right.
Pink.
So, oh, you got one too. See, I keep one too.
Yeah,
Look
I
at
just
that.
had to fear.
We both got a pink elephant right there. Right. Now, some compulsions can also be a choice, though, right? Because if you leave the house, get into the car, go down the street, and then think, "Oh, wait, did I really lock the door?" It's not automatic to go back and just check the door. You know, it may feel like a huge urge or pull to do it. At that point, there is a choice of, do I go back and check, or do I not go back and check?
Mhm.
And some people will tell us it felt like I couldn't do anything but go back and check, right? But then after treatment, people will say, now I know that I have a choice to go back and check. So I would say this: for some of the mental compulsions, um, it may always be that the moment I tell you not to think of something, you'll think of it. But just because you think of it doesn't mean that it has to bother you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you two want to add anything to that, but
Yeah, it's kind of, separating from your thoughts. I use acceptance and commitment therapy when I'm helping people with OCD. So it's that diffusion of the thoughts, right? Just because I think the thought doesn't mean I am the thought. Thoughts are thoughts, right? So just working through that and trying to manage it in that OCD treatment.
mm-hmm. Ooh, I like this one. I've heard a few times where people's most feared scenarios have actually happened while they're in treatment. When this happens, how do therapists help them work through that? And how do you help them move forward without leaning even harder into the OCD? I remember a story. I sent one of my students out. This was when I was working back at the hospital, and they were with someone who had a huge fear of what if they got into a car accident, right? And they hadn't driven for a very long time out of this fear. They just thought that it would be overwhelming if they were in a car accident. And so they finally are agreeing to drive. They'd driven around our parking lot a few times and done things. And now they decided, okay, they're going to go out on the street. So they're at a stop sign, not far from the office, and somebody rear ends them. They were paying attention to their phone. They weren't watching in front of them, and they hit them. And the person got out of the car, assessed the damage. They called the police. The police came and took a report. They even called their parents, but their parents came, and my student was really good about just asking them, can we just see if so-and-so can handle this, right? And she knew the parents, there was a release to them. They'd been in treatment already, so we were familiar with it. And by the time the whole thing was done, they got back in the car. It was still drivable, right? It wasn't a bad accident, bent the fender a bit, but the person, she looks at my student and says, can we continue driving? And my student said, of course we can continue driving. Let's do it. And she proceeded to tell her how she was amazed and thrilled that had actually happened, because she just learned that she can handle the absolutely worst thing that she ever thought would ever happen in her life. And it was nowhere near as bad as she had played it up in her head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that happens a lot, right? That anticipatory anxiety is sometimes a lot higher than if the event actually occurs. Sometimes it's lower, but a lot of times it's a lot higher. And when it does happen, just like Dr. McGrath said, you learn, oh, I tolerated that, right? I can tolerate it again, and I can tolerate other things. So.
Yeah, that to me is just, kind of the pinnacle. We also had someone once who wrote about, being frustrated at their brother who was abusing some drugs and alcohol, and like 2 days later, they died of an overdose, right? Mm-hmm. And she was able to keep that letter with her even when she went to the funeral, and had it in her pocketbook with her, and brought it there. And she was allowing herself to feel all of the emotions in those experiences. Right. So, yeah, coincidences happen, right? There's a chance that one time I'm going to say, hope the ceiling doesn't collapse on me, and something falls on me, right? In the 12,000 or so times I've done it, so far nothing has fallen on me, but there is a chance every time that I do that something could occur. And so I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to just allow for that to occur and learn, okay, I can handle that. I can deal with that. But that is what it is. And if it happens, I'll probably laugh and go, well, finally, after all this time, that finally happened.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. Are there, if the two of you want to, you can see probably the questions on the side. If there's any questions, if you want to scroll around and look that you wanted to have us answer, that is more than absolutely fine. But
I think it's great that Kyle said that they are an OCD conqueror.
Oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm.
So, an OCD. So.
Wonderful. I like that. Oh, now I'm getting Ethiopian restaurant recommendations. The Spice House in Chicago. All right. Their Bear Spice Blend. Well, I have some great Bear up in my cabinet right now, because I am trying to perfect Ethiopian lentils. I haven't quite gotten it yet, but I am working on it, let me tell you, because that's one of my favorite things in the world. And good job, Kyle. All right. Oh, Amarillo says, loves that Deirdre brought up manifestation because struggles with that. The fear that your intrusive thoughts will manifest. Yes. Um, you know, I think there's two aspects. One, you have, and I'd love to hear what you two think. One, you have the OCD telling you that. And two, you could have spiritual beliefs telling you that.
Mhm.
And three, you could have cultural beliefs that tell you that, right? So you might have like the triple threat going on
Right.
of manifestation, and it might be much more difficult to work with certain groups of people on manifestation than it is on others who maybe don't have the cultural or the spiritual background in the manifestation piece as well.
Mhm.
Let's see. Lots of people talking about contamination, physical symptoms.
Mhm.
Have the two of you noticed, as you're working with people who are in the Black or African American community, are there subtypes that you have seen more frequently or that are more difficult to potentially convince people to try to do exposure and response prevention around? Just curious if there's any particular themes at all.
So not more frequently, but ones that are difficult to do
Okay.
exposures around. Like POCD is a big one, right? People
Okay.
struggle with that a lot because they get stuck on, just like most of us with OCD, right? You get stuck on the doubt. But what if it is real? Like, what if it is true? I don't want to do that. That's gonna, make me feel uncomfortable. And that's what we talk about, right? We want to be in that discomfort. So sometimes it takes more sessions,
Mhm.
right? It's not like the regular cadence, but you can still get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like I said, we have to slow down and go at a different pace, but you can get there using exposure and response prevention. It's very important that the individual does the work in between the sessions too. So teaching people how to do that and stay consistent and understanding, yes, it's hard. We practice it together, then you practice it by yourself. You practicing it by yourself is the most important part, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Kyle brought up, and I think that this is an interesting cultural experience and one that I might also ask every month. This idea of just right, self-criticism, perfectionism, which comes up. I'm wondering what the two of you think from a cultural perspective, because in a minority status, I wonder, and I'd love to hear from you on this because I want to be educated. I've heard from people there's already pressure that I have to do better in order to be seen as equal. And then OCD, just right perfectionism, comes in and adds to all of that. I mean, again, we're kind of talking about these double whammy, triple threats kind of things here, but
Mm-hmm.
how about that kind of experience, in the treatment of OCD? That sounds interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Gloria? Or do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead,
Mhm.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking that's definitely a good point. I could imagine that could add to it. I was also thinking about like cleanliness in general is like super important. And I see this also with ADHD of like the stigma of not being clean in certain ways, or like when people have sensory issues and struggle with showering, or the way they're washing their food or whatever the case may be. It's actually super important. So I could see that maybe feeding into compulsions as well because of the expectation that things are cleaned or done a certain way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a few people. We've had conversations about that, right? Oh, I can't do an exposure with my clothes wrinkle because I have to present in a certain way, right?
Sure. Sure.
People already look at me differently. So how
Okay.
can I go out in with a wrinkled shirt on in a public place? Because then I'm going to be judged, or, wearing shoes in the house. No, like that's just not something that should be happening.
Tell me more about that. Shoes in the house.
And so, I mean, at least the
You're both. Nope. I mean, that's an emphatic. Ain't no way.
Right.
shoes
Yeah.
only.
Yeah, house shoes.
Culturally,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
in the Black culture, at least the part I'm from, right?
Yeah.
You don't wear your shoes in the house, right? So that is big if that's part of an exposure. It's like, but my mom told me not to do this. You know,
Yeah.
I have to, wash my food. I can't wear my shoes in the house. When people come to my house, they need to take their shoes off. Like
Mhm.
all of these things are culturally acceptable, and it's kind of hard to be like, well, is that OCD or is that something else? So people struggle with that. Like, how do I separate it? Because, I want to be clean.
Yeah. Hmm. Gloria, can I go back to what you said too about showers? And um, I know people, and obviously growing up white, yeah, washing your hair every day is no big deal. But that does not happen in other cultures, though, where there's various styles or products or different things that. How could that play a role in contamination or cleanliness OCD when I also have a cultural piece that says you don't wash your hair every day, but OCD might say, but what if it's contaminated? That sounds very interesting to me. Yeah.
I could definitely see that being an issue.
Mhm.
From my point of view, like the first thing I think about is the fact of like surprise when people are like, oh, you don't wash your hair every day. Like that's an expectation for some people that you wash your hair every day.
Yeah.
And with OCD, if someone were to wash their hair every day or even multiple times a day, I could see that being just an issue for the health of their hair
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Because I don't think OCD cares about culture.
Yeah,
Right?
unfortunately, it doesn't.
It's not very respectful of anything, honestly. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it will definitely fight you on
Mm-hmm.
anything that it possibly can, or use anything against you that it possibly can. Also,
Mm-hmm.
are there other? We talked about sometimes even on here the line between what a superstition is and when something kind of crosses over into maybe a compulsion related to an obsession. But are there things that might be more particular in the Black community of a superstitious types of belief that might be? I love when you two are like, oh yeah. What
Yeah.
are some of those things that would be interesting to be educated on and learn about?
I would say for sure, like New Year's, right? New Year's, it culturally, you're supposed to, first of all, clean your house. You cannot wash any clothes on New Year's Day, so you need to wash all your clothes before, and then
Wait, why? Hold on, I'm gonna stop you right there. Why don't we wash clothes on New Year's Day?
because you're washing away something. I can't remember exactly what it is, but you're
Oh,
washing something away, so you don't
really?
want to do that, right?
Okay.
And then you should eat black eyed peas and collard greens because that represents like money, and so you want to eat that even if you don't like it, right? Like it's
Okay.
something that you should be doing culturally. So if OCD gets a hold of that, and then your exposure is like, oh nope, leave, wash some clothes on New Year's Day and don't eat black eyed peas and collard greens. It's gonna be like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
does this person really even understand me, right? Do they
Right.
even know where I'm coming from? Because they're not understanding why I'm doing these things.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not the right, therapist or so. So kind of having a conversation about it and talking it through before getting there.
How about for you, Gloria? Any other
Yeah.
superstitions or things that you know of? Or,
So more like thinking about the intersection of like Christianity and the Black community.
okay.
That's
Okay.
where I grew up. So a lot of the mental
Yeah.
health stuff was like, don't speak that or don't speak that as your reality. So like
Sure.
even saying I have OCD would be like, don't do that because that would like make it happen more.
Mm-hmm.
And then also praying things away. Of course, we know like with OCD that could be a compulsion too. So there's a line there. And a lot of the response to mental health in general is, just pray, it'll be okay. And that could actually be causing someone to do more compulsions depending on their culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Gloria. Like that is strongly encouraged, right? Oh, well, you're having thoughts that you don't want to have. Pray about it. Pray about it. And I like to, talk to people about that a lot in session because it's not. I'm not saying you can't pray, right?
Right.
We
Yeah.
just can't do it in response to these thoughts. As a Christian myself, I think it's very important that we talk about that and they know that I'm not trying to tell you you can't believe or pray or do any of those things. So just having a clear understanding is very important because I think people back away from that too because they're like, oh, my therapist told me not to pray.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like I'm out of here. Wrong
Yeah.
therapist.
Don't go back to that therapist then. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Uh, I, this has been attributed to a Russian phrase. I don't know if it truly is, but I've liked the idea of where it goes. It says, if you find yourself in the ocean in a rowboat, praying is okay, but rowing toward the shore is also a very good idea, right? That you really do want to do the action and the thing, and um, that's where I'm always going to stress with people. And I think I hear the two of you also saying that absolutely. But I like what you said, Deirdre, the fact that any therapist worth their salt really does have to understand the cultural background. If I'm working with someone who's Jewish, I need to understand what the rules of kosher are so that I don't make a stupid statement of saying, well, why don't you just have a cheeseburger or something like that? I mean, that would be insensitive to me and or to say, Gloria, well, just wash your hair every day, or Deidre, put your shoes on and go walk around the house or something like, you just, I have to understand, I heard Albert Ellis talking one time, and it was an amazing discussion. It was about the cultural sensitivities of cognitive behavioral therapy and rational emotive REBT that he had. And he said he finds behavioral therapies to be the most culturally sensitive therapies because the goal is to help the person live in their culture in the way that they want to live in their culture and not the way I think it should be done. Right. You tell me what you're doing. You tell me how it's not working in the culture you're in, and I'm going to help you try to figure out how to live in your culture in the best way possible for you. Not because I think it is, but because you. And so you're really going to be directing all of that. And that's what I really love about this work is I think it is very culturally sensitive work that we do. Yeah. So, well, that's cool. And Gloria, you're very correct too. I think in almost all of these months that we'll be talking about this, there will be a level of scrupulosity, right? In the Muslim faith, it is jinn or a demon is whispering in your ear. In Christianity, you haven't been potentially saved yet enough, or you've fallen from grace or committed the unpardonable sin or these types of things. And again, in kosher or conservative or Hasidic Judaism, there's so many rules and regulations to follow about when to pray, how to pray, what to eat, all those things. So it is my job, if I'm going to be a good therapist, outside of these sessions, to do some research so that I can understand the culture and the community of the person that I am working with. And if I don't do that, then I don't think I'm being sensitive to the people who have entrusted their time, their energy, their money into the hour that they spend with me. And my respect back to anybody as a therapist has to be to create a safe environment, no matter who they are, where they're from, anything like that, to make sure that that person feels comfortable enough to share with me what's going on and allows me into their world so that I can help them live in that world in a little better way that they want to live in it. So that to me, again, is key.
Yeah, I was really relieved and surprised and pleasantly surprised starting at NOCD and really the reiteration of it's all about aligning with the client's values.
Yes.
And it's all about making sure that not only are we saying, we're going to try to adjust the way we respond to things, but making sure we're adjusting in a way that's respectful to what that specific person's background is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
We have Opera Lover 2000 says in their Creole community, it's a tradition to clean house, wash, etc., but also a tradition for Asian people too. Which I think there's probably a lot more shared things than there are differences if we really start to look at a lot of these things. They may have different reasons or meanings to them, but I bet we'd find a lot of themes that come across in many ways. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I do want to point out, I think it was Gaba said, how to deal with family members. I think
Sure.
people struggle with
What time was that at? Just so I can see the question.
7:34.
7:34. Thank you.
Mhm.
As a child, I tell my mom and aunt. I always, by the way, I always, speaking of culture, I always read the questions because we have some people who are blind and who, if we just answer the question, don't know what we're answering. So I like to. One of my best friends, actually, before he passed away, he had this rare tumor disorder, and one of the tumors crushed his optic nerve, and he lost his sight within 2 weeks. And so, I've always thought of Cameron, and now, like I said, I always read questions just because I know Cameron wouldn't be able to know what we're talking about if we did. So, so Gaba says, as a child, I tell my mom and aunt all my thoughts. They often told me it was the devil. That was so hard on my mind as a child. I'm educated on OCD now, but how do you deal with family members not really understanding this? What a great question. I'll turn it over to the two of you to take that, please.
One of my favorite parts of working at NOCD is how we incorporate the family in, right? We have some education videos that we can share with our members that they can share with their family that talks about kind of accommodations and giving them a better understanding of what OCD is. Now, of course, we can share that information with them, right? We can't control them though. That's accepting. Um, and understanding if I know if I go to my mom, she's going to say dot 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 no matter what I've asked her to do in this situation. Maybe part of my exposure and response prevention is not going to her about this thing,
Oh.
right? Because we don't want those behaviors the family members are doing to intensify or like serve the same purpose as a compulsion, right? So we really have to kind of set boundaries in that if they're not willing to learn and grow and work with us to fight against the OCD, you know.
Yeah. Boy, that can be hard too, to feel like, how do you cut off a family member potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you come from a culture of a hierarchical family nature where generations live with each other, right? And you might have 3 or 4 generations living in the same home together.
Mm-hmm.
And just think about that. You might have an 80-year age difference in a home, 90-year age difference, 100-year age difference potentially in one home. And just think about how things have changed in our own lives, right? Now, look at the great grandchildren are doing something, and the great grandparent will be like, "We don't do that," and it's like, well, they do now, great grandma. No, they don't. And it just that in and of itself, yeah, such a difficult thing. And again, why the sensitivity is you have to weigh the pros and cons of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you set limits with a family member? Can you acknowledge what somebody says, but then move on and do your thing? So you can still hold some respect for your elders, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that they have to rule your life and you have to do everything they tell you to do. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they might be telling you to do things that OCD would love you to do too.
Yeah, I know for me as a therapist, like my dad doesn't believe in mental health. I love my dad, but he's like, no, that's not a thing, right? He says that all the time, even though this is what I do for a living. But I understand, I accept that's who he is, and I'm not gonna go talk to him about OCD because
you're not going to ask his advice.
So that's just where I am with it, and I encourage people to look at their lives, not necessarily cutting people off, but understanding how to navigate through that in that relationship, right?
Right. Well, if your dad's watching, you're a wonderful therapist. We're very happy to have you here at NOCD.
Thank you. I'm gonna show him.
Look, Dad, that's my boss. Yeah.
I grew up with my parents also not really being super educated about mental health, or not really believing it. And over time, as I've talked about it and gotten into the profession, they've accepted and grown to understand more of what I do and the fact that it's valid, especially, I mean, in the world we're living in post-COVID and such, you really cannot deny some of the things that we've all collectively experienced mental health wise. So it was definitely a long time coming, but for me, it did grow into them understanding and learning a little bit more. It may not be like that for everyone, but.
I'm going to ask a personal question of two. You choose to answer or not, but what was it like going to your families who maybe just outright say there's no mental health issue, or were kind of on the fence about it and saying you were going to enter this field and this is what you were going to do for a living?
My dad is so proud of me, right?
Okay, great, wonderful.
Even though he does not believe.
What you do is done, but I'm really proud of you for doing
exactly.
it.
Yes, and my mom has always believed. So there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, there was a talk about the way I should see my education and the fact that I should think critically about my education, which actually I think maybe wasn't what was meant. But for me, it really did lead to me thinking more critically during my education about what I believe about what I was learning.
Sure.
So it wasn't completely negative, but I think earlier on, before I was an adult, it was hard for me to accept the fact that my parents didn't see it as a thing.
Yeah. And, some of our members come from families that have this too. And then they will sit and wonder, what if I'm just making all of this up? I mean, I've seen that become an obsession for people of what if this isn't OCD? What if this is schizophrenia? What if I'm just making this up? What if it's all of these other things and not this thing that you're seemingly telling me that it is? So I think we definitely internalize some of those things from our families and our culture and bring that into ourselves. And then OCD will grab onto some of that also.
For sure. There's a lot of people who come with that, right? We can be in the middle of an exposure and it's like, well, what if I'm just making this up because my family doesn't believe it's real, And part of that is, like I keep saying, accepting and leaning into the uncertainty, But that is something you work on individually. I don't get into that too much in this forum.
Yeah. Let's see. Opera Lover, just a quick one, says, what kind of therapist do I need to think? Is it OCD or constantly breaking the hair? Not pulling it, breaking. Still a form of trichotillomania. You may pull the hair, you may break the hair, something like that. There is habit reversal treatment that we have. So I think that there's definitely, that's something you can work with. Kyle says, I have a problem with a family that can be hard on me. This is kind of similar to what we were at. Fueled by perfectionism, self-criticisms, made me feel like my values were not heard enough. So similar to the themes that we had there of, I wonder that, and again, I think that goes interesting into culture. There's already peoples who maybe have internalized messaging that you're not good enough, and then OCD grabbing onto that and throwing in there too, just being another shot to the head, right? Of, and here and there and this and that. And just, it's like you're a punching bag for OCD in these types of situations. So I always say OCD is an opportunistic jerk because it will exploit anything that it can. And any sign of weakness shown is an area where OCD is going to jump into. And if there's parts of society that are already kind of beating you down and wearing you down, OCD gets even more openings into someone, if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I shared with my mom I had OCD, she said, well, we all have a little of that. Oh, yeah, well, that's a universal. That one's not cultural. That's a universal, I think, on that one. How do you two deal with that one when you tell people what you do? And of course, that's often one of the replies that we get when we tell people what we do. Oh, I've got a little of that too. How do you address that with people?
Well, there's two ways that goes. Sometimes people say things like that. I've heard this frequently because they maybe really do have a diagnosis and they're thinking,
Yeah.
oh, that's normal. They're hearing all these things. They're like, oh, that's normal because that's their normal. And they don't realize that using themselves as a measuring stick for normal really doesn't work. So I kind of explained that one thing as well. We may go our whole lives thinking that what we do is typical, but we don't really know that. And number two, I would say that with a lot of different mental health concerns, there are things that sound familiar to anybody. But that doesn't mean the experience and the extent to which that person's experiencing that thing is the same. And so just remembering that we don't always know the whole of what someone's going through day to day and how it impacts their actual functioning every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say, oh, really? You do? Well, maybe you should check out NOCD and get a therapist.
Well, good. Thanks for the advertising.
Right? Get some help with it.
Yeah.
You know, if it's affecting your ability to function, like Gloria said, then why not get some help and learn how to navigate through life in a better way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there a link between OCD and depersonalization, derealization? One of my obsessions is about derealization, and what if it means I'm going crazy? There can be a link to OCD in anything. Let's just make that statement. I haven't found something that OCD couldn't potentially link to. I don't know if the two of you have, but I have not yet seen something that was off the table for OCD. And if you have a fear of derealization or depersonalization, one of my favorite exercises is something that we call an interoceptive exposure, where we have people purposely feel symptoms of derealization and depersonalization. We may spin in a chair, we may hyperventilate. There's even a YouTube video that I love called Natural Hallucination, where I have people watch it and follow the directions. I promise nothing jumps out and scares you in it or anything, but it's a very interesting video and what it does to your perceptual experience. So I think that, yeah, there would be a lot of ways that we would want to go about helping somebody deal with derealization and depersonalization for sure. Let's see. Niffermai says, I feel like taboo themes need to be talked about more because there are so many people who just think OCD is all about cleaning and organizing. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why a lot of people may be misdiagnosed, right? Because they don't understand that's what's happening, and then the provider doesn't understand that's what's happening, and it leads to things that can be worse. So it is very important for people to hear information about the other subtypes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, again, nothing's off the table, right? There is no topic that is sacrosanct, and OCD will go, I won't go there. I'm not going to touch that. OCD's like, the more important it is to you, the more I'm interested in going there and doing something more specifically about that. So absolutely, that is where OCD wants to go more than anywhere else. That's exactly where OCD wants to go. Mm-hmm. And that could be very especially held in cultures where there are certain beliefs that might be seen as you don't doubt, you don't question these things. And then OCD is going to go, well, then let's do some doubting and let's do some questioning. Mm-hmm. Right? That is exactly where we are going to go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Layla asks, what are some things that we could do about contamination? You two want to throw in on that one? I've got some ideas, but they hear from me all the time. So
yeah. So it depends on like what the intrusive thought is, what the fear is. For example, if you have to wash your hands every time you touch a door handle, might practice touching that door handle and delay washing your hands for a certain amount of time, sitting with that distress and using that response prevention message while you're, not washing your hands.
Mhm.
So, and then we'll build upon that. Okay, touch the door handle, didn't wash my hands for 5 minutes. Now I'm touching other things with that so-called contaminated hand, and I'm sitting with the distress. I'm not wiping these things down. They're going to stay how they are. And I'm going to use that response prevention. That's just one example, but it just
Yep.
depends on what the contamination is and going from there step by step.
And then wait 10 minutes and then 15 and then 20. And then how about just not wash your hands until you go to the bathroom next or something like that? Or if you do find yourself and you do try to clean your hands, get them dirty right away afterwards. Live in contamination, right? Not in what OCD wants. Live in the feeling that it is. Yeah, I liken it to if we went into your brain, and we know this happens. If we even took a metal probe into your brain and we hit certain areas of your brain, like your hand might jerk if I hit a certain spot. You might feel a certain emotion if I hit another spot. And think of OCD as a metal probe that goes right into the fear part of your brain, right? Or the disgust part of your brain, or the shame part of your brain, or the guilt part of your brain. It's got all these little spikes that just travel off into these different areas depending on what it is that you have a thought or an image or urge about. And what if you just allowed yourself to learn that you could handle when those OCD, send a little spike into those areas of the brain, and that just because it didn't actually mean you had to do a darn thing about it whatsoever, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know about either of you. I have not seen OCD tell the truth as of yet. I don't know if either of you have, but no. Okay. I like to check with everybody else. Maybe I'm a little out of sorts. I don't know, but definitely can. Even severe health anxiety can absolutely be dealt with this. OCD wants you to do more tests and then doesn't trust the test. I always say this: you could ask 100 doctors, 99 could say you're fine. One could say, well, there might be this one thing. And guess what OCD is going to go? Finally, one doctor tells the truth. There we are. Oh,
Yep.
Finally, we found the one. Yeah, that is it. Well, we're almost at our time, but I always like to leave to our guests a little bit some parting words. Thank you two for being here tonight, being open and honest and having these conversations, which I think are just so important as we continue to work to break stigma throughout our world and get people to know that OCD doesn't discriminate. So let's have these frank conversations because they're important to have.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Gloria, you want to start us off? Any last things you wanted to say to everybody?
No, I'll let Deidre go ahead. I have to think about it for a moment.
All right, you think for a minute. All right.
Yeah, so thank everyone for coming and having these questions. Keep asking the questions, right? Because then you'll find out how to manage your OCD. Now, I'm not saying just doubt and keep asking like that, right? But finding information that can help you manage your OCD in a better way. And find a therapist that you feel comfortable with and that you can trust to walk through this journey with you, right? Because you don't have to do it alone. There are people out there who have been working with people with OCD for a great deal of time, and they can help you through this. And don't wait. Just go ahead and get the help.
Awesome.
I second that. Don't wait and definitely get the help. And even if you've been to therapy before and maybe it didn't work or you felt like it wasn't a good fit, sometimes finding a good therapist is like dating, and you just have to, keep trying until you find someone that you really connect with. So don't give up.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for listening, and thank you to my guests tonight. So appreciate having the two of you here. It was wonderful. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, go to NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com, where we work with OCD, body-focused repetitive behaviors like hair pulling and skin picking, hoarding, and other anxiety disorders, mood conditions, and trauma. We're happy to work with you if you are in the US or Canada or the UK or Australia. And in the US, we take more and more insurances all the time. So check us out at NOCD.com, and we'll be back again next Wednesday for another episode of our Wednesday night webinar here at NOCD. Thank you both. Such a joy to speak with all of you. And everyone, go out and do some exposure and response